Dear chess friends, probably you'll agree with me when I say that chess is really an amazing and beautiful game. But sometimes chess can be really cruel. Sometimes chess is pushing us to the limits, and the worst feeling that I get in chess is sometimes when I don't convert winning games into a win, when I play only a draw, or if I maybe even lose the game in a winning position. And sometimes I get simply destroyed by my opponent, and okay, it's a bad feeling, but it's not probably the worst feeling because your opponent is probably better. Your opponent outplayed you. Your opponent is strategically better than you. But as I said, the worst feeling is simply when you don't convert winning games into a win. I remember one game that I played in Zagreb. I had a +7 evaluation, and then I lost the game with a simple tactic. I got destroyed. I was very, very furious. I couldn't talk with anyone through the whole day. It was really one of the worst feelings that I get in chess. So, as I said, in order to improve that, we have to, of course, study. We have to also learn from our own mistakes. And probably one of the most interesting end games that you can play, and probably you didn't convert into a win, it's this specific end game that I've prepared for you. Maybe not, of course, in the same position, but with tiny little advantages here for you with the white pieces against your opponent's disadvantages, and probably you pushed it somehow to the limits, you pushed the pawn somewhere, but still you didn't convert this specific endgame into a win. The evaluation, for instance, in this particular position is 2.5 in white's favor, although the material is equal, but we have to understand the specific themes here that are happening in this particular endgame. So the first thing that we have to notice is that black has here many light square pawns, which are, of course, an object of the attack of our own light square bishop. They can be attacked by our own light square bishop. The other thing, when we talk about advantages here in white's position, is that white has a space advantage, which means here that we have this advanced pawn on h4, and also that we have the opportunity to get our king to a5. So far, it's nothing dramatic. So far, it's nothing spectacular for white. But if white plays the game correctly, white can win the game. And I think we had many times a similar position and never won this specific endgame. But I'll show you now very important patterns, very important techniques in order to convert this kind of an endgame into a win. So the first thing that we have to use here is the maximum activity. We have talked about the specific ideas in our endgame studies many times. The maximum activity of your pieces is very important. Although there are probably not many pieces on the board, you see, but use the maximum activity that you can get. Now the bishop on d3 is simply on the optimal square. Now your opponent maybe pushes the pawn on f5, and now we play f4. The endgame that I'm showing you here is a beautiful game played by Janovsky against Pinkus back from the 5th decade of the 20th century. Notice how white is playing with his pawns on dark squares. Of course, when the pawns are on dark squares, they cannot be attacked by your opponent's light square bishop. Now black simply continue with the move bishop to e6, and it seems so that nothing spectacular can happen. You see, even if you get your king here, we'll play bishop to c8, so you don't have access, of course, to the a6 square, so nothing dramatically can happen. But now g3, again with the same idea, keep your pawns on dark squares. Now after bishop to d7, now very interesting choice here, bishop to b5. If, of course, bishop takes b5 happens, then you get the king closer, and this becomes now a completely winning endgame here for white, because we'll have access to the pawn on a7. You can maybe try something like this, but even if you get the king closer to the a7 pawn, then you leave the protection of your d5 pawn. Again, it's game over here for black. So let's see, if you play king to d7, again, we'll pick up this one. Maybe your opponent could try here to go into an opposition, but now after king to c6, we get simply the king here, and now we would have access to the b4 square, so there's no further opposition of your opponent's king here with the move king to c5. So now in one moment we'll play king to b4, push the pawn further. This king will get deflected to the protection of the potential promotion. Now we get the king closer, pick up this pawn on d5, then probably afterwards also this pawn. So the game is over here for black for sure. So let's go back. So you see, first motif is because of our space advantage that we have with our king against our opponent's king, is that your opponent cannot trade off the bishops. This is a very important thing here to say. Now after bishop to e2, we have bishop to pardon, bishop to c8, bishop to e2. Now after king to c6, now comes a very important move. This move you have to know by heart. This move has to be played in this kind of an endgame. You have to play now h5, trying to split the pawn chain. The cool part about this move is, for instance, if your opponent doesn't react, let's see, he plays something like king to b6, then we go a5, kicking away the king, and now after bishop to b5, king to d6, we lock again further the positional light square. So for instance, if he goes king to d6, again with the same pattern, h6 we play, he goes maybe here with the move king to c7, bishop to b5. As we said, your opponent cannot trade off the bishop, so he cannot compete anymore. Now after something like bishop to e6, we have bishop to e8. The problem is now your opponent cannot step back here to c8 because you have this beautiful idea, bishop takes g6. We have h takes g6. Now we push the pawn, and this pawn is unstoppable. The game is over. So after move bishop to e8, of course your opponent has to now play bishop to g8, but now you have access again to the pawn on c5. If of course something like king to d8 happens, then bishop to c6 is winning the game. We can pick up now this one, and again it's a completely winning endgame here for white. So see, this move is very important. If black doesn't react, we will eventually push it to the push it to h6, and then we will lock out this pawn on h7, which becomes simply an object then afterwards of white's attack. So now g takes h5 here was played by Pincus. In the game, Janovsky played of course bishop to h5. Notice that we have created now new problems in black's position. We have created now two isolated pawns which are again on light squares. Really important idea. So now here king to b6 was played. Even if you try king to d6, then the problem is now we'll zugzwang our opponent, so we will force him to make a move in one particular moment. We'll simply play around a little bit. After bishop to d7, the problem for black now in this particular position is that black cannot control with the light square bishop both of the diagonals. So the bishop is stuck to the defense of the pawn on f5, but also is stuck to stop the further progress of the king here towards the queen side. So for instance, we play bishop to b5, again the same motif. Your opponent cannot trade off the bishops of the board. Now we play again around. We have access to the a5 square now. Your opponent has to control now the a6 square, but now we zugzwang him. Play king to b5, bishop to b7, bishop to d1, and now after bishop to c2, what can you do? Look at this. This pawn is hanging. Even if you try something like king to e6, then we have access to the square c5, and now from this point on we can further attack this weakness. Even if you try bishop to d7 here, then of course king to a6 is winning the game. It's a messed up game. We'll take out this pawn and it's a game over. Even if you try bishop to b7, then obviously you lose the pawn on f5. So see, after move bishop to h5 here that white played, you can of course play also king to b6, but now again the same motif, a5. The king has to step back, and now we deliver a check. Now we can have access to the b5 square. Notice again, bishop to d7 is not working because we saw when you trade off the bishops, our king is much closer to the action. We can pick up this one, get closer to the d5 pawn. So again, this is not working. King to e7, now bishop to h5, king to d6, and now again playing around. We're playing zugzwang moves. Then in one particular moment we won't have to access to the a6 square. All will keep the pressure here against the pawn on f5. Here bishop to b7 was played, bishop to d3, attacking now the pawn. Black is trying to control now again both of these diagonals with the light for bishop, but the bishop gets simply now overloaded by the pressure of white. So that's why bishop to c2. Now black tried to play tiny little moves just in order to reach the position, but again we zugzwang him. Now he's forced again to make a move, and now after move king to a6, we get closer to the pawn. It's obviously game over. We can pick it up, and now again black tries somehow to lock the king, but don't worry, again we zugzwang him. Bishop to c2, look at this, h5. Even if you play something like king to c6 here, it's not a problem. Your opponent doesn't have to play h5 here in order to get the new pawn on the light square. But now our king is getting out of the mess. That's the most important thing. Our king is finally getting into the game. Even if you play bishop to b7, as we saw, bishop to f5 will happen. This pawn is hanging. Even if you play bishop to d7, then again king to a6 is going to happen. You have, of course, an escape route here. Again, black cannot control both of these diagonals. If he plays, of course, king to c6 in order to control now everything, then bishop to a4 is again winning the game. So obviously nothing can be played, so that's why h5 was played. But now again a new pawn on a light square here after king to c6. Again a new check. Now we're going behind the pawns, simply taking out a6 here, bishop to c8, bishop takes h5. We have king to c6, and now after bishop to f3 in this position, black simply resigns. So you can of course here play king to d6, but again we simply get the king closer, get also here towards this side of the board, eventually take out this pawn. Our basic goal is not to push the pawn on g4, but it's game over here for black. King to b8 of course can be played, then afterwards will be king to b6, then pushing this pawn a7 a8. So whatever you do, it's a lost game here for black. So that's the motif. First of all, as we said here, let's repeat it again. Very important move in the beginning, bishop to d3, most activity out of your bishop, keeping the pawns on dark squares, and in one moment, very important idea, h5. We saw this idea after g takes h5, bishop to h5, bishop comes into the game. If your opponent doesn't react, then we lock the position with the move h6, keep everything on light squares for opponent, and then the pawns are becoming an object of our attack. So okay, this is our study for today. I hope that you enjoyed the study. This is, I think, a must-know idea. You want, of course, to win this kind of an endgame, because probably when you will play a game, maybe a classical game or a rapid game, your opponent will, I don't know, maybe offer you a draw, and then you say, okay, it's the same material, this should be a draw position, but actually it's winning for you. So push it to the limits, try to play at least somehow like Magnus Carlsen, because Magnus loves this kind of endgames. He squeezes them into wins for sure. So in my opinion, this is, as I said, a very important study in same colored bishops endgames. So okay, if you want to see more about chess endgames, about strategy and tactics, check out our here basics in chess series, and also my become a master in chess series. Here are the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.